Hi, guys, and welcome back. In this lesson, or rather this session or review of the BCS Business Analysis Practice sample paper, we're going to be covering question 8 this time. So let's, as usual, we always read the question to get a bit of a context and try and identify what is being asked of us, what techniques, which area of knowledge they're trying to assess us on. So it says here that Pigeon Parcels have been developing their balanced scorecard, or BSC. This includes the critical success factor, CSF, highly skilled and motivated delivery drivers. A number of key performance indicators, or KPIs, have been identified to support this. These in turn have targets associated with them. Which of the following might be targets related to the critical success factor? Select all that apply. Okay, so we have 5 selections here, and if we read the instructions again, it says which of the following might be targets related to this critical success factor, and we have to select all that apply. So we have to select more than one. It's usually we have to select more than one when they say all. So if they say select one, then they're literally asking for one. If they select all that apply, then it could be one or more than likely 2 or 3. So what do we know about, first of all, about the business balance scorecard? So contextually, we know that a balanced scorecard is used to balance out the measures that take place in the organization in order to see which areas in terms of improvements are being made across the board. So we can use those 4 categories: the financial, the business process, the learning and growth, and the customer. And then we can actually look at the measures, or we can look at the strategic objectives in each of these areas, or develop strategic objectives for each of these areas. And we can then create measures for all these objectives. And once we've created the measures, once we've defined what we're going to be measuring towards these objectives, then we can then define what the actual targets are. So what do we need to achieve in order to reach this objective? And then we can also, sometimes in a balanced business scorecard, we can then also identify all the projects that are taking place, all the actions that need to take place in order to transition the forward. So what it gives you a sort of an overview on one page of what exactly is going on in terms of what the strategy is and how it's moving, making this transition. So sometimes you would be able to identify, if you're carrying out a balanced scorecard of your current strategy, then you might identify certain projects that aren't relevant anymore, and you might want to remove them. You might want to take those off your scorecard. And if you're developing a new scorecard and you've put all of your current measures and your targets on there and all of your objectives for each of those 4 categories, then you might want to add additional measures and targets for additional objectives, because you can actually map all the objectives through the balanced scorecard to see how they all relate to each other, and then create new projects in order to transform or action these objectives. So if we think about critical success factors and we think about KPIs and targets, what are these things? So once we have our strategy, we know what our plan of action is, and we have our vision and our mission. These then kind of guide us and informed towards what do we really want to measure, and what do we want to achieve in the organization. So we will develop certain objectives in order to carry out the strategy and reach this goal at the end. And these objectives will then help us define the performance measurement. We need to measure what is going on inside the organization as we're trying to achieve these objectives. and as we're moving and we're transitioning forward, because we need to see if we're on the right track or not. If we're not measuring this, then what are we really doing as our tactics are being played out, the actions? So the difference between all these things are that the objectives, for the specific objectives, we may then define critical success factors. So these are qualitative statements that actually state and say, this is what needs to happen in order for this objective to be a success. So there's no real numbers in there or anything like that. It's just a statement saying, what do we need to achieve, It's a qualitative description of the critical factors that need to take place in order to achieve the objectives. And there may be a number of them for a single objective. So you can almost see, if you look, we were thinking about the VMOS before. We were talking about the VMOS. It's almost like we're going much more deeper into the resolution of this now, into the specific details. But this is in the context of performance measurement now. So in this case of this specific question, the CSF is highly skilled and motivated delivery drivers. So this is one of the critical factors in order to achieve one of the objectives in the organization. So how do we move on from a critical success factor? We then need to define or find a KPI that allows us to measure this. And this answers the question, how are we going to measure this critical success factor? It's more quantitative. We're finding basically the definition of the measurement of the indicators, the key performance indicators, what exactly needs to be measured in terms of performance in order to reach this critical success factor. And they're often KPIs, common ones. So for customer satisfaction, there may be very common KPIs called Net Promoter Score, NPS, or customer satisfaction scores or customer satisfaction indexes. They're very commonly used KPIs. So what are we going to use to measure quantitatively towards these critical success factors? And often they use terms such as a star rating or a number of this, or maybe even a driver satisfaction index could be used in this case. And instantly, if I look at this, common critical success factors, they'll use it as a quantitative, so it's the number of this. I can see in here that A, C, and E is actually saying that the number of drivers who have advanced driving qualifications. C is the number of drivers who complete the staff survey each year. And E is the number of complaints upheld against the drivers. And they don't have any specific numbers in them, but they're telling us how we're going to be measuring it in a quantitative way. So those three aspects there, A, C, and E, are way more likely to be KPIs rather than targets. So what is a target then? So a target then comes after we've defined our KPIs. So we've got our objectives, we've determined what our critical success factors are to achieve those objectives, which are just qualitative statements. There's just text, nothing to do with numbers. It's just about what needs to happen. And then the KPIs are the quantitative statements about what we're really going to be doing to achieve these critical success factors. And they're quantitative and they're smart. So we need specific targets. So we actually need a figure. We need a number or some specific thing in a quantitative way for us to be able to measure it. Are we getting to a certain point in time? Are we achieving a certain number of things? Is it a percentage? Is it a value? And this is what we want to achieve. A target is what we want to achieve in terms of this performance measurement. And if we look at B and D, we can see there it says that 80% of drivers gain an advanced driving qualification within 6 months of joining. And D says the driver satisfaction is over 85% in the year staff survey. So B and D have these quantitative targets, these aims, these goals that we want to reach. So it's way more likely that B and D are the correct answers here. And so that, and remember that performance measurement is what guides and informs us towards the vision, or is guided and informed by the vision and the mission. And we then performance measurements such as going through this process of going through the objectives and breaking them down into the critical success factors and breaking them further down into the KPIs and breaking them even further down into the targets so that we know where we're heading. You can see that it's way more detailed. We're going all the way from the VMOS through the strategy into a much more detailed measurement now, into the actual performance measurement of how this transition is taking place. So we've almost covered everything as the transition, as we're measuring, we're analyzing everything in the organization here. And the balanced scorecard is a really, really good tool because it allows us to see all of these things, and we can put our targets in there for all 4 of those categories and then link those to projects and link those to the objectives to see what really needs to be done in a quantitative way for these objectives to be achieved. And for these objectives to be achieved, we also need to carry out certain projects within those 4 categories. And if we've got everything going right with balanced across those 4 categories, then the organization will be in a much more healthier state. It'll be moving towards a much better strategy. So I hope that's helped you answer this question. B and D are the correct answers. And in the next question, we're going to be going through question 9. So I'll see you there.